believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendas, also known as Ricky Varans, and a great episode for you today. Today we have American filmmaker David Donnelly, and he has an amazing new documentary called The Cost of Convenience. As you could probably assume, it's about big tech, it's about surveillance, it's about the loss of privacy, it's about social engineering. So basically, it's about a digital prison that we are building for ourselves. So please check out the documentary. I'll put links in the show description to the documentary and the trailer, so please check it out. But before we get into this thought-provoking conversation, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of these discussions and guests I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. Whatever platform you're watching or listening to the Ripple Effect Podcast, you can rate, subscribe, leave a review, and that will help fight against the algorithms that are censoring shows like these. But for those regular listeners, the people who download just about every show, the people who watch just about every show, if you're in a good financial situation, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be a lot. We have a Patreon page where you can donate as little as $1 a month. And let's be honest, you wouldn't even notice that dollar is missing. But if a small percentage of the people who watch and listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. So no donation is too little to send. And also you can send a one-time donation via Venmo, PayPal, our crypto wallet if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin. We have a merch store if you want to get stickers, hoodies, mugs, t-shirts, tank tops, whatever you're looking for. Check it out. You can support the Ripple Effect Podcast and get some cool merch. You'll find links to all this and more in the show description or on my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com. But if you're looking to go directly to the merch store, you can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com, and that will bring you directly to the merch store. And then we got a couple sponsors. First one being Content Safe. Content Safe syncs all my video channels together. So all the places you can find Ripple Effect Podcast videos like Rockfin, Rumble, Odyssey, Minds, BitChute, and many more. The video version of my episodes get there thanks to Content Safe and their help. And what they do is they let me upload to one location and then syncs all my channels together. So magically, the thumbnail, the description, the video, everything appears on all the video platforms I'm on. So if you're a streamer, podcaster, YouTuber, and you're looking to expand, if you're looking to find a more time productive way of getting your videos on all the platforms you're on, hit up Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener to the Ripple Effect Podcast, and he'll definitely take care of you. The next sponsor is the University of Reason, created by Richard Grove, who's a dear friend. And all these sponsors are friends of the show. They're past guests who I know personally and have had relationships with. So it's all people I support, all people I like. So definitely check out all the sponsors. And Richard Grove created these autonomy courses that are helping a lot of people and can help you if you're an individual at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to get off that treadmill that you feel like you're on, running in place, getting nowhere. Check out the University of Reason. Connect with a freedom-minded, liberty-minded community, learn some new skills, expand on some skills you might already have. Online courses are getting more and more popular, and if you feel like you need a change in your life, you feel like you just need to do something different, connect with a different community, network with different people, check out the University of Reason. Please use the links in the show description or on my website, and hopefully you can help yourself and support a show you enjoy at the same time. And then the last sponsor is Element Electrolytes. It's the only sponsor I use every day. And if you don't know what Element Electrolytes is, it's basically little packets of electrolytes that taste amazing that you can pour in your water, or you can get flavors to pour in your coffee, and you can use it to hydrate. You can use it to make cocktails. You can use it to help with your hangovers. You can use it to optimize your body and mind. And it has the right electrolytes, the right dosages, Has nothing you don't need and only the things you do need. So no artificial colors, no artificial flavors. It won't kick you out of fasting. It won't kick you out of ketosis. It's sweetened with the stevia leaf. It can help with tons of symptoms like cramping, brain fog, fatigue, and many other things like migraines and symptoms that you might not even be aware is related to dehydration. And the thing about drinking water is that gets the moisture into your body, but to really get it into your tissue, to get it out of your blood into your tissue, you need electrolytes and the right electrolytes. Most of what we sweat out is sodium. That's why this is high in sodium. It's perfect for a athlete or kids that are running around and you need to avoid cramping. And this product was formulated by Rob Wolf, who's been on tons of shows like Joe Rogan and many other health and nutrition podcasts. He also has his own health and nutrition podcast, but he's also a jiu-jitsu black belt. He started the first CrossFit gym in the US. He's one of the most famous people who started and pioneered writing books on the paleo and keto diet. He has an amazing book and documentary called Sacred Cow. He's worked with tons of professional athletes, so he really knows his stuff. When he formulated this specific formula and this product, there's a reason why he used these exact dosages and electrolytes. And like I said, there's tons of benefits in hydrating with electrolytes. If you use the link in the show description, you'll get a free gift with every purchase. But also, just use the link in the show description to go on the website to check out all the science and all the information on their website about Element electrolytes and the benefits. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
Went to school in St. Louis at Washington University in St. Louis. It was pre-med. Clearly didn't work out. Moved to Los Angeles the day after I graduated and spent about 15 years in Southern California, just trying to really figure out exactly what it was that I wanted to do in film. There was a big recession that hit when all these banks started to go under, and I moved back to the Midwest for a little bit, and I started making educational short films, and then we did our first feature-length documentary called Maestro, which is about an Estonian-American conductor whose name is Pavel Järvi, and that led to probably about 8 years worth of filming the world of classical music and multiple documentaries and series and live concerts and shorts. And I just kind of traveled around with orchestras and soloists for that period of time, really just kind of expanding my worldview and trying to show a side of a very traditional art form that was contemporary and athletic and really sexy and cool, and trying to get that, to a larger audience. The pandemic hit. At the time, I was in Laguna Beach, and all of our shoots and concerts and events got canceled, somewhat, obviously permanently for quite some time. And then I started to really focus on how much time people and how we were connecting with technology. And I just got really into wondering like what the effects were of this. And we started to interview a variety of people, start to research, and from there that led to The Cost of Convenience, which is the film that's out now at costofconvenience.film. You can learn more about it. It started with us going to one of America's first technology addiction centers called Restart, which is in the Seattle area. It's in Bellevue. And there I was just blown away by how big of a problem this was, and actually talking to people whose lives have been destroyed by not really having any boundaries or kind of paths forward. And then from there, we started to dig deeper and deeper to eventually realize that, okay, it's the individual can only do so much, because this is really a larger systematic issue. And so we have an amazing cast of people that are academics, that are experts, one of the early investors in Facebook as well, and started to try to figure out, what's the root of this problem. And ultimately, we came to the conclusion that so many of the existential crises that we face today Whether it's climate change or polarization, civil unrest, discrimination, all of these things can be traced to our relationship with technology, and in many ways the bad incentives for internet platforms. And that's what drove us to make this, and really to try to share basic information about how these things work. Because the analogy that we use is, you might not know how a car works in great detail, like how exactly an engine works, but basically how to drive a car if you have a license, of course. Because cars can also be dangerous. There's lots of things you have to understand. They're great vehicles. They have a utility function. They can also be very dangerous, and so they can be used as weapons. The same thing goes with internet platforms and our phones. And yet there's no license required. There's no education around that. And there's very little regulation or boundaries. And we're seeing the consequences of that. And as you said earlier, pumping the brakes on kind of this rapid acceleration of technology, which accelerated by about tenfold during the course of the pandemic. I think that what we're trying to do is not slow the brakes on that necessarily, because I think that that's almost impossible to do, but rather accelerate the education and awareness to try to get to a level that's on par, so that we're not constantly chasing the next iteration of technology, only to be dealing with the consequences of the last thing, which what you can see now. Now you see, that Facebook and TikTok are all going on television, and getting completely destroyed by Congress people who now realize that it's against the public interest, and they want to look good in front of the voters. But now we're already on the next thing. Now we've got AI and all these other platforms and so we're always a step behind. And really what we're trying to do is just to spread the word about the education behind this and how things work, so that if we actually understand the basics and start to self-educate, then hopefully we don't have to keep seeing the same vicious cycle repeat itself over and over and over again with each new thing that comes out.
Now, in regards to the addiction to devices, tablets, phones, all that type of stuff, I have two children. My son's 9, my daughter's 7, turning 6, or turning 8. I mean, and I always think about, like, I'm around other parents and they talk about, oh, my kid can't put down their tablet. My kid, and I always tell them, I'm like, listen, like, it's not all on the parent and the kid. Like, it's not completely your fault, because those things are designed and engineered to keep them addictive. And there's a lot of money, a lot of research, and a lot of resources going into figuring out how to pull at the right desires and temptations and whatnot to keep your kid addicted to that. How much of that did you uncover? And do you agree with that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that we can do. Well, there's two elements to this. The first one is that, which was wild to actually think about, is if you go to a lot of the top schools in the Silicon Valley area, where the creators of these different platforms, often are based, the hottest kind of school to put your kid into, as far as a status symbol, is a technology-free school. And in many cases, it's not uncommon that they don't let kids use the very things that they're creating. I mean, isn't that wild? I mean, it's like, if it's like, what do they know that we don't know, to where they don't want their own kids using this stuff? That's the first kind of like red flag that everybody should think about. Like, okay, well, maybe, we should think about that from that angle. The second thing is that, just like everything else, it's now becoming a class issue, to where, if you're going on some kind, like, the new luxury is to be tech free, whether that's some kind of tech free resort, whether that is, a new restaurant, or where you have to put your phones away, to where it's that kind of privacy. And that's limited to the kind of people that can go for periods of time without having to worry about, their boss contacting them, or potentially picking up their kids, or whatever it might be. And so now you see, somebody that might be working multiple jobs coming home completely exhausted. And of course, it's easier to give, a kid an iPad at that point, and who can blame them? And so now we're seeing that the more hours of screen time is starting to trend with wealth, and this is that's also very disturbing. And so it's just, you see those dynamics and you start to see that this is a really serious problem, and it's causing so many other consequences as a result of that. And that's why we just really wanted to get to the root of it. And there's a lot of great documentaries out there that are about particular issues or events, the Facebook whistleblower, great documentary about that, the great documentary about social media in particular. But this is like a huge puzzle, and it's quite complex. And so you have to pull back and kind of take a big history approach and start to think of how it all fits together. And that's what we tried to do. And that's why it took several years. That's why I was independently financed, because obviously this was not something that everybody wanted to see get made. And this is, and that's why it's been a challenge also to get the word out. This is the kind of the opposite of what, the algorithms want to share.
One thing I loved about your documentary is that it seemed like, for some reason, I don't know if it was because of the attention to B-roll or music or imagery, but it kept my attention. And one of the problems that we have with technology is that our attention span is so short now. And I remember doing like majority of my research watching documentaries, and I would watch so many documentaries, and I could stay up even during the most boring documentary, but if it had good information, I could stay engaged. And now it's like really hard to stay engaged in a documentary because typically, a couple minutes in, you start thinking about your phone. Let me pick up my phone. Let me see if I got any notifications. And I didn't do that with your documentary. It's
Thank you. Yeah.
And I also loved how you did go back historically and talked about, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and kind of just showed everybody how it all evolved. And I think people of our age, who went from the analog world to the digital world, like we're more like a spectator, like we've watched the transition. But for kids who are growing up only in the digital world, like how do you fight, eventually being like, hey, this is just the world that they were born in. Like, I guess everybody has a phone, give them a phone. Everybody has a tablet, give them a tablet. Like the kids have become a experiment, right? Like there's no past, we can't reflect on past generations and say, hey, kids were getting phones at this age and it seemed to work out fine, or kids were getting Instagram accounts at this age and it turned out fine. Like our kids are becoming the experiment. We're going to see how it turns out. Like from all the research you've done, like how dangerous is the trend of kids getting, you being on YouTube all these hours, having Instagram accounts and TikTok accounts and all these Snapchat accounts at a young age. Like what's your concern about this? Do you feel like some of this is overblown, and maybe because we're such adaptive creatures we'll figure out a way through it, or do you think there are some long-term consequences that people aren't really paying attention to?
I think that it's impossible to know how deep the consequences are going to go and how long it's going to take for them to manifest, but we can already see in the short term with anxiety and suicide rates spiking. And it's very hard to do a scientific study to where you can blame or attribute, some of these mental health issues to just technology. At the same time, you can see screen time increasing and new technologies being introduced, and you can just look at the lines and you can see, okay, well, there's, that's possibly, connected somehow. I think the thing that how we looked at it was that if you look at something like smoking, which was culturally acceptable, to think that we allowed that in airplanes and in cars and in restaurants is it seems ridiculous, right? Our generation, especially, which I call the last of the analogs, we're the last generation to actually be able to connect, to see these two different worlds merge together. But there was a sacrificial generation of people that were told by their doctors smoking was okay, or saw their favorite movie stars always smoking. And those people, a large amount of them ended up, having severe health consequences from that. And so they kind of were like the sacrificial lambs of us understanding that that wasn't something we should do. Unfortunately, I feel like the kids right now, they're the same thing. They're the sacrificial lambs of this great experiment to which we don't know how it's going to end. And I think that is what is something that every parent should think about. And also kind of, I think our generation has a responsibility to actually spread the word about the things that we do know, because believe it or not, a lot of these younger people that we've spoken to that have watched the film really want to learn about this stuff. They feel like something is wrong and they can't put their finger on it. And it's not their fault. It's just because that they don't know what to compare that to, you know? They don't know how to a lot of times hang out with friends without, staring at their phones in a group. And so there's all these things that I just don't see it ending well. And one of the major themes of the film is the importance of critical thinking when approaching this issue, which is also probably why, we haven't been able to kind of hit as mainstream as we'd like to get, because it does require a certain element of focus to be able to understand these very complex issues. And one of the things that people have to be able to do is appreciate that two things can be true at the same time. Technology can be great, but it also can be harmful. AI right now is saving a lot of lives by evaluating medical data, helping, cancer prevention, surgical operations. I mean, there's amazing things that technology can do. Transportation, cleanliness, sanitation, you can go on and on and on. That's true. But other things can also be true. And that's what's so hard for people to grasp, but that's what we have to be able to grasp in order to have a healthy future. We have to be able to understand that both are true. The problem is that the benefits have billions of dollars of marketing budgets that have been shoved down our throats for decades. And so everyone knows the benefits. The costs people are not talking about until they're forced to by some kind of government interaction or legislation.
One thing that concerns me about AI, well, one of the many things that concerns me about AI is the fact that so many people who are involved in it don't seem to care about the big picture. Like they're just like, oh, but it's doing this and it's doing that, and technology is gonna save us of this and protect us from that. And it's like, yeah, that's great, but some of our issues that you're using technology to fix is also it was technology that caused the problem in the first place, right? Like you can make the argument that the chemical companies that created like asbestos and paint and all these synthetic materials could be having a negative effect on our health. You could make the argument that GMOs and pesticides and all this stuff that you could sell it as like, oh, this is a great thing for humanity, is causing now other issues. And so it just seems like this vicious cycle of like, same thing with public transportation, right? You got diesel, well, if it's not a diesel powered engine, it's a electric powered car, which obviously has conflict minerals and batteries. How do you dispose of those batteries? So it's like, oh, a great technology, but it's like there's also a price to pay for that. And it's like that's the thing that people don't seem to focus on, is like there's a price for everything, right? And there's this video that I remember on YouTube. I don't know if it's still available on YouTube, but it's called Free is a Lie. And he kind of breaks down like, okay, you have all these services, right? You have Google, you have this, you have that, you have Google Maps. Like, yeah, it's free, but it's not free because you are paying for it. What are they paying? What is the public paying for those services?
I mean, it's literally 90 minutes of, in the film, we explore all that. I mean, privacy is one thing, data privacy. Roger McNamee, who was an early Facebook investor, says brilliantly in the film that, it's illegal to give away your organs. You can't sell your organs in the black market, although it happens, but you're not allowed to. Your data is also yours. And yet we're giving that away because we're just not realizing that there's value to that. Once this data is extracted and manipulated by algorithms, these algorithms aren't human. They don't have emotions. They're simply designed to achieve success. Success is binary for them. It's to generate a click or to generate a particular, response. The reason why I'm so you know, passionate about getting this message across, especially to younger people, is because our educational system can't move as fast as technological changes and growth. And it's really important that people understand how these things work at a young age. You know, if you make a post and that post is permanent, that could influence what kind of job you get. If you're scrolling through and it's telling you what kind of college that it thinks it should be good for, you should be able to attend. That's how, like, the most important decisions in a human life are now being manipulated by algorithms. And that's pretty terrifying. Who you might want to marry, what kind of job you might want to get, what kind of career to pursue, what college to go to, just name it, you know, where to buy a house, you know, who to bank with. I mean, all of these major decisions. And they were more and more influenced by these things that are non-human. And that's why it's so important that I think at a young age, people, this fear that we all have about AI and stuff like that, well, we have to face it and just educate each other and ourselves on it. And that's just got to be a part of what it's like to be a human now. I just don't see, you know, I don't see us being able to slow down the speed, especially because there's, I think, kind of a fear of, you know, us losing the AI race. And, you know, what if somebody like Russia or China gets this instead of us? And I think there's some truth to that. There's also a lot that's, you know, exaggerated, but for many reasons, I don't see us being able to slow this down any less likely than we were to be able to make, you know, the first atomic bomb. And so as a result of that, the only thing that is within our control, besides voting and letting our politicians and culturally letting people know that this is an issue that we're not going to stand for and that we want all this transparency, in addition to those things, I just think it's important for people to start being accountable, to start understanding how these mechanisms work in our lives. And I know it's a lot of work. It's overwhelming because there's always new information coming out, but just being able to understand the core basics of how these things works is important. Because I think, you know, people are much smarter than we give them credit for. And if we start to explain to people, hey, like, you know, the stuff that you're seeing in your feed or these things that you're posting or these decisions you're making, these could have permanent impacts on your life. I mean, once that's clear, you know, I think that there'll be a response to that. But it's much easier that's much easier said than done. But I think that's the angle that we're taking, which is just to spread the message and to constantly, you know, let people know how these basic mechanisms work, because those basic ways that things work, I think that's, I mean, AI is obviously adding fuel to the fire there, but I think those will still be true and sometime down the road, like how, you know, what we're seeing in our feeds and so forth.
Yeah, well, the thing about Google, it's not a search engine, it's a marketing feed. Like whoever pays Google or whatever narrative or website they want to push on you, that's what you see first. And you know, it's like 90% of people don't go past the first page. So if you can get to the first page, then, you know, that's the information people are going to see. And that's what makes this so dangerous, is that you know, I think people are smart, but our intelligence and our worldview and our perspectives are all based on the information we have access to. Well, those who control the information control the masses, they control the people. It's social engineering. You can push people in one direction or another based on the information they have access to. You know, I brought up earlier Dr. Robert Epstein. I'm a huge fan of his work. I think his podcast that he did with Rogan was one of the most important ones that Rogan ever did. When he was on my show, I told him that, you know, he talks about how, you know, and he's a left-leaning guy, but he talked about how Google, you know, during elections, you know, they'll do all these little tricks to sway people one way or another. For example, last election, it was like 50% of Republicans, they would send a notification to remind people to vote, but like 90 something percent of Democrats, they were sending little notifications to go vote. Like all these little things, and they don't seem significant, but they have all the data, they have all the information to understand exactly what they need to do to sway you in one direction or another. And you know, when you're researching information, even if you want to be a journalist, an independent journalist, if you want to do your own research on any topic, you know, you go online. like there's information being suppressed. Zach Voorhees talks about how there was a blacklist at Google, and they would say, I know I got banned off YouTube, and once I got banned off YouTube, all of a sudden on Google, like you couldn't find my show anymore. You couldn't, they didn't just suppress me on YouTube, which was the second biggest search engine online, but I was also suppressed on the first biggest search engine online, and Google, which I could go to Google and spell something horrifically wrong, but their algorithms and their AI was so intelligent that they could figure out what I was trying to spell and give me that option. For some reason, once I got kicked off YouTube, I couldn't find my show. Like I would, people would ask for a specific episode. I'd go on Google, be like, I'd put in the exact title, exact name of the guest, and it wouldn't come up. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been blacklisted on YouTube and Google, and which makes logical sense because it's the same company. But that's a concern. This idea that like people are intelligent, but if you're controlling the information, what hope do the public have?
I mean, that's one of the issues that we bring up in the film. Dr. Sophia Noble, who's in the film, who wrote a great book called Algorithms of Oppression, speaks about how it's how biased the information that you get is going to be based upon all kinds of different factors. Digital redlining was a huge issue for quite some time, to where algorithms were driving people of different races to different parts to live in. I mean, where to buy houses. I mean, we know a lot of this, and you can see the individual headlines, but what I was struggling to define was like a lot of people are putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, which is what we really tried to do with this, was to put, the search engine dilemmas as this, also with the business models, also with, social media and mental health issues, and just show how they're all connected. And to the root of this is just, reestablishing the power dynamics. Carissa Valise, is in the film, associate professor of artificial intelligence ethics at Oxford. She wrote a fantastic book called Privacy is Power. And when you start learning about these power dynamics and us versus them, they have millions of data points on so much us as individuals, to the point to where they can actually predict our behavior and then sell that prediction as a future, and that model is called surveillance capitalism, which was coined by a wonderful professor at Harvard who wrote The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff. But that is still what people are doing. That's how a lot of people are making money. And until those models change, the incentives for these companies, which have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to increase, value of these companies, that is, it's not going to change. But it is important in the meantime for people to understand that that's how things work. And I think that's the biggest problem. I mean, how many times have you spoken to somebody and think, oh, I Googled it, so it must be true? It's like, okay, well, is it? And there's alternatives, there's a lot, but I mean, it's like, they're just nowhere near the amount of data. And so it's, it puts people in a challenging position. But that's why I think awareness is the first step. It's just letting people know exactly what's happening. And then at least they can understand that there's going to be, some potential, that they can at least understand that maybe they need to keep pursuing, the whatever they're trying to learn about.
In your research for the film, was there anything that was really surprising to you? Anything that really stuck out that you're like, I didn't know that, or I didn't know how serious this issue really was?
A couple things. I was really surprised that a company like Facebook had all this data, well, now Meta had all this data that showed that they knew that they were harming especially young girls. And as I have an 8-year-old daughter, I know you've got 2 kids. I mean, it's like, it really made me angry. It's kind of like, wait a second, you knew that you were, really hurting these kids? You know what I mean? Like, you didn't, like, really? Like, you didn't, because of shareholder value? It's like, there's just, I think parents should be enraged. And I think they should be passionately self-educating, sharing the message with other people, and you can see it happening. Even as of last week, you can start seeing people in the press and new groups like Mothers Against Social Media Addiction. But I think this still needs to become more of a larger trend. It's still in pockets. It still hasn't been kind of because to make this in popular cultures is a massive acceptance. It's a shift. But I do think that shift will eventually happen. And just like I said, when it comes to smoking, smoking used to be considered cool. Now you see people kind of hiding in the corners doing it. And I think this is going to be the same thing. I think when you see people staring at their phone and just clicking away, it's going to be looked at kind of like, ooh, like. And I'm not by no means some kind of. I mean, I'm on my phone all the time, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to learn more about it. But I will say that having this awareness has helped me structure, healthier relationships with it. There's another great person in our film. His name is Tommy Sobel. Tommy used to be the assistant to Steven Spielberg. And if there's somebody that understands time management and priorities, it's him. And he's now a digital habits coach. And when he starts breaking down like how much time is being spent by the average person and what you could be doing with that time, I mean, it's just like, really, like how much of your life has been spending this. It's like you sleep, you're on your phone, and like then you got some time to work, and like that's it. And then it's just the big picture has to be constantly, I think, put in perspective, and that's something we're not doing because of this. Obviously, because it's this instant gratification, and the tools that are pushing us are deliberately don't want us to think of the big picture, for that reason. And so that's what I think is the real challenge, is to get people to pull back and to start thinking about this philosophically and long term. And if we knew that we could stop smoking earlier, how many lives could have been saved, between all these different, between lung cancer and secondhand smoke and you name it. And I think this is the same situation that we face. It's just a different product where the executives are lying to us. They know that it's harmful. They've got great marketing, and we are slow to culturally change.
Yeah, the concern about the smoking metaphor and example is that smoking, most kids didn't, can't start it at like 3, you know what I mean? And because
Yes.
so that's the kind
Yeah.
of concern. And you could do it anywhere and everywhere. You can do it in the bathroom. You could do it while, on your way to school. You could do, you just can be on it all the time. And, the thing that's concerning, it's like I remember growing up and my parents being old school Europeans, they preferred cash over like a debit card or credit card or whatever. And it was like, I remember just seeing people, slowly transitioning to debit cards and, it's like digital money now has become digital. And it's same thing with like just about every aspect of life. We're like slowly things are just becoming more and more digital. You had that Lex Freeman Zuckerberg interview where they're both in like the VR room and they're talking to one another. And it's like, that seems insane that anybody would pick that over physical reality. But when, when you can create any world you want and have any image you want, it's like there's going to be some people that are unhappy that will say, hey, I'd rather this digital world than the physical world. You see it now with like a lot more people, playing video games and being into that type of interaction online instead of physical interaction. I think even with the trend of kids not getting their licenses as early anymore, like now, like I remember when, I'm sure you were the same when we were growing up, it's like I couldn't wait to drive because it was like
Yeah.
it was a physical license to freedom. Like I could do
Absolutely. Yeah.
want. I could do, and now people just don't care. And you see kids just like they're completely content with just staying home and talking to their friends while playing Xbox or PlayStation or on social media. But the thing that gives me hope, and I say it all the time, is that I think there's something missing that cannot be recreated digitally, right? And I do think that, you see the trend of people, it's like they're in a social environment and it seems like they'd rather stare at their phone and be in this digital world than be in the physical world. But I think what's happening, like you talk about in the film, and you've kind of highlighted, is that it's not as fulfilling. It's going to lead to depression. It's going to lead to unhappiness, and then eventually you're gonna hopefully realize, like, okay, like I'm not spending any real time being present, talking, be interacting, staring at people when I'm talking to them, being involved in the conversation and in my environment. And then, once you realize like there's something missing, hopefully people will take a step back. And it's weird because one thing I talked about with Douglas Ruskoff is how, when technology was first evolving, you figure it was always a path to more freedom, more free time. It's like when we were spending most of our time as hunter gatherers, trying to survive, we didn't have time to think or socialize or ponder on things. And then as we create technology, faster ways of killing an animal, faster ways of transportation, all these things, you figure we'd have more and more free time and we'd be more and more happy. And instead, technology, instead of freeing us, has, in many ways enslaved us.
There's a very important concept that I learned along the way, and it's called limbic resonance. And this is something Dr. Hilary Cash, who was the co-founder of this place called Restart, this technology addiction center, described to us, and that so many of the patients that come to her are suffering from. And what it means is that when you're physically next to somebody and you're in a safe space and you're having a real conversation and you're connecting with them, it causes a hormonal change in your body. And that actually increases these healthy chemicals, and you need that. You don't get that even right now as we're zooming. You can have an intellectual connection, but you're not getting the physical hormonal exchange. And the more and more time that we do this, the less we understand and less we get that. And that is, linked, not having that is linked to anxiety and depression. And we can see that manifesting. And something as simple as understanding the importance of limbic resonance shows that, okay, we have to be connecting with people and having real conversations with family, with friends, with intimate partners as we get older. Those things have to happen for us to really feel fulfilled. And, the thing that we're going through right now as, larger picture is people often don't realize it. Historically, if you're living through a revolution, and we are living through a revolution right now. And the real choice that we all have to make right now, as individuals, as as parents, as citizens, is what parts of being human do we want to preserve and fight for, and what values as of America do we want to preserve and fight for. And this isn't a political issue, and the film is not political. And as you can see from watching it, it's bipartisan. We have clips from both parties. It's like, to me, the hope is that this is a huge opportunity to unite us. This is one of the only things that people on both sides of the aisle think that we need to start tackling. And yet, you didn't hear anybody on either political party talking about this as a major issue. And I really think that this is a uniting opportunity for us to come together and start saying, okay, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. People all agree that we need to get this problem out of control because it's snowballing and we're in a downward spiral, and we're not going to be able to thrive or even survive as a nation and potentially species if we don't get a grasp on this. And the revolution that we're living through has to be understood as this huge change in what it means to be human. And that's great as long as we're understanding that and we're starting to have a conversation about, okay, well, what parts do we want to make sure that we still have, as that. And we're not having any of those conversations. I mean, and of course in pockets we are, but I mean, as a mainstream conversation, we're not having that. And I think this is the most important issue of the election because it impacts so many other of our problems. And that's what I hope to see is just, people. That's one of the reasons also too why we just are trying to get the film out there now. It's like, hey, we just need to start having this conversation now. It's not about who you're voting for. It's about understanding that all of these aspects of your life are being influenced by something that's largely invisible. And we want to bring transparency to that. We want to pull that out and allow people to start having conversations about it.
Yeah, without a doubt, we're social creatures, and I think that the synthetic digital world, the not organic world, is no replacement for that. And like you talked about it in the film. During COVID, people had more and more screen time, and that was already a trend and a direction we're going to and towards. But obviously, with COVID, it just supercharged it, and people were less and less happy. And because the social interaction via, Facebook and text messages and Zoom didn't replace human interaction. There's been studies, there's plenty of studies with like monkeys where, they starve a baby monkey and then, they put food in one cage and a mother in the other cage, and it needs the comfort of the mother more than it needs the
Sure.
survival. It is a crucial part of our survival and our needs and it's just sanity, right? Like, I mean, in prison, they put you by yourself, right? You're around
Yeah.
some of the dangerous people, liars, maybe people that you're concerned about your well-being being around them, and they punish you by putting you by yourself. And if you're alone long enough, you will, go crazy. So,
Robert Greene, who's in the film, who wrote 48 Laws of Power, one of the best-selling authors alive, he makes the point that punishment, the most severe punishment that we have, as you just said, is isolation. And in many ways, that's what this technology is doing to us.
yeah, you also talked about why politics aren't talking about it, right? Nobody on either side is really seem to be as concerned about this as some other people like yourself, filmmakers, journalists, authors, and whatnot. I mean, obviously they benefit from a lot of this stuff. You look at like Cambridge Analytics and like all the just firms and consultants that use this information or their partnerships with big tech to their benefit. So do you think that's one of the reasons why you're not seeing them, speak out because
Yeah,
they think,
100%. Yeah,
oh,
they're both getting, millions of dollars of funding from, I mean, there's no question about that. But at the same time, that's why the more we have more power as citizens, the more that we unite behind this. And it starts with just understanding how it works. And I think, just the idea of just wanting to protect yourself and your family and your loved ones alone, just when you figure out exactly what's going on, I mean, it's hard not to just be like, really, like what the fuck? Like, we gotta, it's how is this happening in America? Like, we really got to start to stand up and say something. And it really starts with just getting a grasp on their vernacular and the basic understanding of what's going on, and also not deeming people like myself like Luddites. Like, I love technology and I use phones, and it's like, once again, you have to be able to hold two things in your mind at the same time. Two things can be true at the same time. Technology can be great. Technology can also be harmful. And, we're falling into the trap when we say that, oh, these are just, techno pessimists and, they're holding us back. That's not the case. It's the opposite. I have a very positive view. I very much consider myself a techno optimist, but that requires an informed citizenship in order for that to happen. And that's the gap that we have right now. And it's because of a lack of transparency. And we got to close that gap, and we have to start having conversations about it on a regular basis. And I think it'll be a huge sigh of relief when we do, when the elephant in the room that's impacting every area of our life is starting to have, is just to get out there and to really just talk about it, be like some kind of national catharsis.
well, the thing is, transparency. I mean, there's not even transparency with the terms and services, right? Like there's that documentary, Terms and Services May Apply. It was an older documentary
Yeah,
about,
it's a good documentary. Yeah.
yeah, great documentary. And they change the terms and services without letting you know. They'll purposely make it difficult to understand and comprehend, so you don't, and they make it purposely long and small font, so then you can just hit agree. and you're giving up all your information. And that's just the stuff that you're agreeing to. I mean, a lot of these companies, apps and whatnot are doing it without you even knowing, constantly listening, constantly, for the longest time, I was called crazy because I'm like, listen, when you talk about something and then all of a sudden you get an ad for that thing, I'm like, that's not accidental. And they're like, oh, they're always listening. I'm like, if I can say, okay, Google or hey, Siri, and my phone just went off now. It heard me say it. That means the mic's always on. And the reason why, they're also really smart. Like they will send or constantly sending information, especially pixels and whatnot. Google phones, which is actually what I have, but they're constantly sending information, and they'll send a lot of the information when the phone's being charged because it kills so much of your battery life. And so that's like one thing that I've heard a lot. It's like when it's charging is when it'll start sending a lot of that information out there.
That's why it usually does it at night too.
Yeah.
That's when most of the signals are sent. And also, it's not just phones. It's now every smart device is collecting data. Your television is likely sending data to different companies to see your watching patterns. Your car. There was just a big article last week about this, which we have in the film, but I think it's becoming more of an issue. Cars are collecting all kinds of data, especially, for example, your weight. So if you're sitting into a driver's seat and it's your car, it can see if you're gaining weight or losing weight. Now, imagine what happens if they can send that to an insurance company. And all of these are things that have to be, once again, we have to have conversations about it. But data privacy is certainly a major theme in the film, and just being able to understand that we do have rights to our own data, and that by itself is a separate conversation. But that's what I think makes this experience different of this film, is that we combine all these different issues that there might have been separate conversations about, and we're trying to show that these are all the same conversation, which is really about this revolutionary period of technology and culture merging, and about how we are going to thrive throughout this period instead of letting it actually start to separate us and divide us. And how can we let this be a uniting force? And I think it's possible. And that's where I find hope, is talking to people of all different backgrounds and political affiliations, and seeing that, this is something that everybody cares about.
Yeah, everybody it should, or we're gonna end up being in the next episode of Black Mirror.
Yes, we already might be. By the way, I got a hard stop in 3 minutes, so I just wanted to give you the heads up.
Yeah, no problem. So, real quick, one of the last questions I want to ask you before you got to go is this motivated? Is a lot of this lack of privacy, just all the lying and the deceiving and pushing of narratives of big tech? Is a lot of it? Do you find it to be just capitalism at its best, like just finding ways to extract every penny they can out of the human being, or do you think that there's something darker and deeper there, if it's social engineering, if it's really trying to control the masses?
I tell you what, I haven't made my mind about how deep the rabbit hole goes, because once you start going down that rabbit hole, I mean, it's pretty easy just to to devote the rest of your life to to digging through it. I will say that it goes beyond capitalism. I do believe that capitalism is still a strong force that has lifted so many people out of poverty, that has created so many opportunities. Somebody like myself, growing up in Kentucky, had the first opportunity to to go to college, and anybody in my family. I'm very much think that there's a lot of opportunities that this has created in a very positive way. Of course, it's an imperfect system, but that it is the best system, that we have right now available to us. At the same time, I think that when people have so much power, and this is a higher concentration of instantaneous power that has ever been accumulated in the history of our species, that power, it's almost like godlike. And so I really think this goes beyond capitalism. It becomes more about the retention and the sharing of power dynamics. I mean, if you just think about how much power you could have to have a single click and impact billions of people around the world, or to make a tweet, and suddenly, and then you throw AI into the mix, and suddenly, what if that's not even you who said those things, and now they're using your voice and your likeness to say that, and there's a actual physical revolution happening, not a existential one that is causing real consequences. And then by the time people realize that it wasn't real, it's too late. I mean, that's a kind of power that is very, Orwellian, and that's what we don't want to happen. And that's why it's so important that we self-educate and do things like, watch the film and have conversations about it and share this information with people we care about, and actually start to spread the word.
Without a doubt. So let people know where are the best places, or where are all the places they can find the film, and then also any social media platforms you're on. It's funny because we're
Yeah, well,
episode.
once again, two things can be true at the same time. I mean, that's the whole point, is that you can go to costofconvenience.film. You can learn more about the film. You can do an advanced preview for a limited time. But ultimately, there's also information there about how to support this issue if you care about. There's legislation that you can click on to sign your name to petitions. There's information about screenings, and also too, if you just want to contact us about questions, we just love to have conversations about this and to help educate other people and also define solutions. The film does a great job of presenting the problem, but it also presents a lot of questions. What are the solutions to these? And that's what we're working on now. Is we're working on a series of modules to help provide a series of solutions to people, from the individual level to the systematic level. And that's our next kind of project that we're working on, is how to answer a lot of the questions that are raised from the film itself.
Do you guys have any intentions of making it available on YouTube to rent eventually, or any of
Yeah, of course, eventually. Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, because of the topic, it's been kind of challenging presenting this to distributors. We didn't soften any blows. It's pretty honest. It's bipartisan. There was a lot of ways we could have kind of cheapened the angle a little bit to make it more marketable, but we really wanted to keep the integrity of the story intact. And so as a result, it's not necessarily something that is easy to watch, but that's what I think makes it essential to watch. Down the road, then we'll be on every major platform. But right now, we wanted to have the ability to directly communicate with an audience. And that's what we're doing right now.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show description.
Thank you.
And then I'll also send you the links to the show once it's up and
Great.
running. Thanks, David. I really appreciate the time. Hopefully.
Yeah, hey, really enjoyed the conversation, man. Stay in touch.
That's absolutely. Take care.
All right, bye.